This is the final station, social innovation and transformation.
Brian, Gallagher. Nice to meet you. Is Frederick okay?
Yeah.
You sure? Fred is even better? Okay. Yeah, we can start. And Wes is not here yet, yeah?
And he's on my panel, the same panel.
You and Wes work?
Yes, and then very jam.
Yeah, the same test.
Oh, driving down. This is a little further away.
Yeah.
It was in the
In the Congress Center?
It's called something. I'm trying to think. What's the name of that hub anyway? But it's a bit of distance. Actually, it was Boston Orchid.
That's what I said.
Hi, Gary. Vaishali, Sinha. Nice to meet you.
Okay, are we ready to go? Welcome, everybody. It's fantastic to be here at Social Innovation House as part of the Catalyst Now programming this week. My name is Brian Gallagher. I'm the co-founder of the Abundant Circle, which is a catalytic fund of funds that's focused on bringing together collective impact, systemic change and investment, and conscious capitalism. And spent a good part of my career as the global CEO at United Way. And so I've made the shift over to the social innovation world thanks to Frederick and company. And we've got a fantastic panel here today. And let me just say, as I introduce the panelists quickly, because you've read who they are and so forth, and better to jump into the conversation, is I've been stopped by a number of folks to say, oh, this is great. This is new funding models. I want to hear about how to get new funding. So at some point, put that in the back of your head. We're going to talk about how we unlock money and how we do it creatively. First, on my far right is Vaishali Nigam Sinha, who is the co-founder of Renew in India. It's a decarbonization solutions company. She's also the chairperson of sustainability and the founding chair of the Renew Foundation. To my immediate right is Frederick Tsao. I don't actually know how to introduce you in a short period of time. You're going to have to do that yourself. This is a fascinating man. Fourth generation family, business leader. The quote or the philosophy that caught my attention as I was reading Fred's background is, in order for me to be well, everyone must be well, and vice versa. Couldn't agree more with that. So we're going to find out how you create a happy world and a prosperous world at the same time. We have a special last-minute addition to our panel. This is Gary White. Gary's the CEO of water.org, and also something that I just learned about called water equity. And Gary and I were just chatting before we got started. Water.org has created some fascinating ways to use debt and other financing instruments to fund the access to water across the world, and we can't wait to hear about it. Is this Wes?
This is Wes.
This is Wes.
Thank you, everyone, and sorry for being late.
Wes, pronounce your last name for me.
It's Sechrest.
Sechrest, is it? Really? So, CEO of Rewild, and also Chief Scientist, which is a fantastic title, I have to say. We're going to get into the conversation, and I'm going to start generally, so you can each, in the answer to this first question, say a little bit about your company, your work, your philosophy. There'll be follow-up questions from that, and then we'll dive into the conversation from there. But Vaishali, I was just watching the last panel on collective impact and this idea that you've got to get institutions from NGO, business, government working together. Why is it so important in your estimation to have that cross-sectoral approach on things like climate change?
Sure. First of all, thank you. Thank you for the introductions. It's an absolute pleasure to be here in the Social Innovation House. Just a little bit about our company before I answer your question. I'm the co-founder of a company called Renew, which is a clean energy company, decarbonization partner in India. We're about 13 years old and have set up about 11 gigawatts of assets on the ground and have about a pipeline of about 5 gigawatts. So fairly young and fairly robust portfolio. The portfolio has wind, solar assets. We have green hydrogen. We are looking at pumped hydro, storage, etc. We manufacture solar panels and have about close to 9 gigawatts of solar cells and modules in terms of a factory, which we have in Rajasthan and in Gujarat. So really across the value chain. We started as a wind generator. So it's been a journey from 25 megawatts to about 11 gigawatts in a short period of time. As far as to answer your question on partnerships, we are a company which deploys assets in India on the ground, on the back of Beyond India. We've raised funds from around the world. Canada, we have CPPIB as an investor. With respect to investors, we had Goldman Sachs as a first investor at a time where people really didn't understand how an IPP could be a business model and it could be profitable. So from there, because the cost of electricity was about 3 times more expensive than conventional, of clean energy was 3 times more expensive. So people had no idea, but we had a plan, and as we speak now, it seems like it wasn't a bad plan because the cost of renewables is now a fraction of conventional. So it's been a journey. None of this, as I said, and our partners, our financial investors are from the Middle East, from Japan, from Asia. We had ADB as one of our first investors. So it's pretty much around the globe, partnership, financial investor partnership to deploy on the ground. We had to, in a way, partner with the government to kind of give feedback with respect to what needs to be done in terms of enabling policies, because we were one of the first players on the ground to be able to build the sector, take it forward, execute efficiently so that we could get more capital into not only our company, but the sector at large. As we speak, I think the sector, in 2010, 12, we had about 20, 30 gigawatts in India. As we speak now, it's about 10 times at 200 gigawatts of assets on the ground. So it's been quite a journey. None of this would have been possible without financial investors, B2G, which is business to government partnership, private sector to private sector partnership with our communities, because
Say more about that. How do you think about the physical community in which you're doing business?
Sure. So, if you look at India, over 65% of Indians are in the rural area. So it's an amazing opportunity for us to really partner with them and engage them in this whole journey which we've undertaken. If you look at climate change, it's really happening on ground in India. Whether it is floods, to a great extent, it's happening all over the world, but there are a lot of examples where there is actually need for not only, I would say, the government does what they can do, but they can't do everything alone. You do need private sector partners like us, people who are really doing work on the ground, to go and engage with them with respect to, for example, there's a lot which needs to be done around education, climate education. We run a program called Lighting Lives, which is it's one of my favorite programs, where we've done a survey of, pan-India, of schools which have less than 3 hours of electricity. And so what we do is we go to these schools which have less than 3 hours of electricity. We put up a solar panel. We use that as a tool for obviously ensuring that children at least have a fan in villages where the temperatures go over 50 degrees. We are sitting in Davos, so that sounds nice. But when you're going as a 7-year-old to fetch a pail of water to a well and then coming back and then running to a classroom to attend a class, you really don't want to, your mind is not there. You want to sleep.
Yeah.
And so if you have a fan, and we also use that electricity which is generated, which is clean, to sort of have digital education there, and the teachers are trained. Once the class is over, we do remedial education for some of the students who need that help to learn more. We talk about the science of the panel, which is up there, because a lot of the kids don't really understand it. So just sensitizing them to clean tech, clean energy, what is the future, why are we all concerned about it? All of that happens in the school. And then after that, what's really important, because in India, in rural India, young girls dropping off is out of the school system is a big problem, especially when they are 12, 13 and around that time. So we bring in parents for self-help group-related engagement, for farmer agriculture workshops, etc. So we engage the parents to come and see what's going on as well. And so when they encourage children to continue being in these schools.
So you can see the confluence of the business interests and the community interests in those examples you just gave, and therefore sharing the resources with community in real time. And Fred, it kind of gets me to the question I wanted to start with you. Again, you can obviously share anything you want to share about your current work in business and community and associations and so forth. But it struck me that your philosophy seems to be centered in the idea that human success and economic success are connected, are they're linked. You can't unlink them. And so the question becomes, for me anyway, is how do we achieve human success and economic success, and can we build systems that drive health and happiness that are economically good and profitable, and for a company, for a region, for a country?
Well, what is commonality for all, and all created by human? Nature. We're all part of nature. We are nature. And what's economics? Economics are activity to meet our desire. When our desire are full with greed and grasping, and we go beyond our needs into doing things, we become stupid, become ignorant, because greed will blind you. And then we see the world. If we create based on true human needs, we're all affluent. Today, with so much overcapacity, it's a problem of distribution and redistribution. We all know that. But no, greed has not stopped. Have you heard of the Trump currency that just came out? That overnight, with thin air, created $250 billion? How insane this ignorant world has become because of greed. So in order to return, there are certain things. There's another thing that we're in common, consciousness. You talk about consciousness. We are nothing without consciousness. But what are we conscious about? Because our receptors are dissolving, our greed is coming up, we're blinded with ignorance, we're not aware of our own consciousness. So consciousness shifting is important of a cure, and love is the solution because it's our nature. We are born to love and enjoy joy itself.
So would you say that in the kind of with the heading of this session around new funding models, or that it's really a redistribution of, it's more of a redistribution of current assets, current resources, in terms of the human success and in addition to economic success and greed?
Not now, because
now.
we're still ignorant. So need to be much more granular in operating the current system. The new system is to be created in the new era, but the current system is operating system. We got to deal with what's current system.
Has to deconstruct the current system?
Well, yeah, deconstruct and reconstruct in such a high speed. It's almost like our body cells regenerating.
Yeah.
That you're not really aware that you're not the same person after 7 years. That none of the cells is going to be the same, right?
Yeah.
So this is a thing because we're not conscious about how our body die and create. So the same thing is you work the system. Now, how does a system work, right? Business models. Business model determines the funding model, scaling, your investment.
Yeah.
And then you start looking at your same thing, your risk and reward change and how it's organized, all the way from angel investment, late venture and blah, private credit, scaling money and blah, blah, blah. The whole chain of money in the system needs to be adjusted. Some we add a new blended finance initiative. Others, we are redefining the matrix, which are going to the impact investment. But the fundamental of that doesn't change.
Right.
And then the most important thing is business. I'm a business without more superior business model to cover the cost of long-term investment for the matrix. You have no possibility of funding to go in. So business must create more sophisticated through integration and collaboration to, as usual, same standard thing of doing business, creating superior business model to deliver short-term and to fund long-term development.
Perfect. Thank you. Wes, again, looking at Rewild, it's, part of what you read about is, I forget exactly how you all say it, but it's, we don't have to recreate the planet, we have to rewild it. And I'm struck by looking at your work, how bottom up it feels, how local up it feels, how inside out it feels. Is that accurate? And as you think about systems change and all the way down to, as Fred said, these models that provide resources and money and so forth, that in your view, this is bottom up and inside out is the way you do your work?
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a great way to encapsulate how we work. Just very briefly, for those of you who don't know Rewild, we're a nonprofit organization. Basically, my 17-year organization merged with the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation about 4 years ago. We rebranded to Rewild. The reason that we rebranded to Rewild was actually because there aren't any brands that actually represent the folks on the front line. So whether or not they're indigenous peoples, local NGOs, organizations, governments that are actually on the front lines doing the work. We know conservation works. Last year, our team and many other conservationists published a paper in Science that actually showed that conservation works. We know that investment in conservation works. The problem is the scale of investment is woeful. If you look at in the US, most people in the US spend about a third of their income on their house, their home, mortgage, rent. We as a global society spend well less than 1%. And then we look at tragedies like the fires in Southern California, Lahaina, Europe, and we wonder why these places are burning down. And it actually comes back to nature. And if you look at every single society in the history of the planet, they've collapsed in part or fully due to what we've done to the local environment. Starting with the Tigris and Euphrates Valley, the Fertile Crescent is now the infertile crescent because of huge agricultural inputs for thousands of years that degraded nature. What we need to do is restore nature, show nature as front and center, the biggest thing we can invest on, because a dollar's worth nothing on a dead planet, and we know the solutions. We need to scale that up. And I think just quickly on the financial side, we're starting to look at this as a global and national security issue. So for people who think that it's a really cute thing to save polar bears and rainforest, they don't realize that actually nature is key to human well-being, it's key to climate, it's key to long-term persistence of human civilizations. And if we can't start investing in that, and we can't look at this as a national security issue, we're not gonna have any change. And even in the US, we're able to do this. The US Foundation for International Conservation Act passed last month, really looking at this broadening of the climate movement into the environmental movement, back to understanding that nature and biodiversity and wildlife are key to our existence. So that was passed in a bipartisan way. The same way we used to pass environmental laws in the US back in the 70s, we're now actually doing in a unified way.
So it's it's in addition to national security, if you want to make money, you've got to rewild the world.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's supply chain comes back down to that as well.
Yeah. You know, I have a friend who is fond of saying to me and many others that humans are a species living out of context. That we act like we're not part of the planet. We're just here for a while, and we'll take what we need and we'll move on. And you feel that theme so far, and I got a feeling we're going to hear that theme again with Gary White. You know, Gary, as I said, is well, I didn't say, but he's the founder of water.org, and we had a quick conversation about some really fascinating financing models that you've been a part of now for the last number of years. Why don't describe water.org to us, but also describe those financing models to us.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. Glad to be here and be part of the panel. And with Catalyst now, it's an incredible organization that's doing a lot, bringing, I don't know if Giroux's here in the room, but Giroux's vision to make this happen and to get to this point is pretty remarkable. Right now, over 2 billion people don't have access to safe water. More than 3 billion don't have access to safe sanitation, which is pretty striking in the world that we live in, that we haven't, figured out how to make that happen, given all the other accomplishments we've seen as a planet. And so today, women and girls will spend 200 million hours walking to collect water. To your point, a lot of them aren't in school because they're out collecting water. And so there's this huge loss of potential, this huge ability to help them create value in their lives if they can get access to water in an affordable way. And the upside of doing it through a market-based solution is that it can be scalable. If you look, we're all familiar with 1.5, right? 1.5 degrees. There's a different 1.5 that we're focused on, and that is $1.5 trillion is what it's needed in order to get water and sanitation to everyone. And right now, less than a third of that is coming in. If you sum up all the charity, all the investment, all the government money, all the private sector money, it's less than a third. So we've got to figure out how to bring more capital in to solve the problem. And so from our perspective, we don't see those billions of people necessarily as a charity problem to be solved as much as a market to be served. So our role is to figure out how do we connect the global capital markets to women making a few dollars a day so that they can get access to the solutions that are best for them. And that's what we're in the business of. We create financial plumbing that allows that to happen, to allow investors to get a financial return on their investment while we use that capital to fund literally millions of microloans through a network of financial partners that we've built around the world. 175 financial partners that we use philanthropic capital to spur, to lend for water and sanitation, to help them de-risk their lending for water and sanitation so that they'll make these loans, to help them understand how to market these loans. And so now more than 70 million people, over 80% of them, or women, have gotten access to water and sanitation by getting a small loan, sometimes as little as $300, that they use to connect to the local water utility. They can't afford that $300 to connect, but they can afford $1 or $2 a day that they might be paying a water vendor. So we help them. There's this concept that it's really expensive to be poor. And if you look at a woman who's paying $2 a day for water because she can't get a $300 loan so that she can get a water connection, so she only pays maybe $10 a month, that's the value that's created that allows us to reach them through this network of financial partners, and then to allow investors, whether it be the Skoll Foundation or the Hilton Foundation that invest in the funds, whether it be Caterpillar, Microsoft, Starbucks, all of these corporations are actually using their balance sheets to invest in the funds. And that is done through an organization that we created as a separate company called Water Equity. Water Equity is a registered asset manager with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We've now raised 5 funds, nearly $500 million across those 5 funds of committed capital that we can use to scale up these microloans through these networks around the world. So that's how we're creating a business that's owned by an NGO that can actually earn money, collect management fees to scale up even further, while also staying very true to that core value and purpose why water.org was created in the first place, is to solve the global water crisis using new tools.
Was that capital on the sideline and not being deployed before, whether it was Starbucks or any of the other companies? Was it just not being used before?
It really wasn't. It wasn't being used from their balance sheets. So a lot of corporations will use their foundation to donate money to help people get water. They'll use their marketing budget sometimes to kind of do this, but they weren't using their balance sheets to actually go out and get this done. So if you look at it from their perspective, working with us, and I should say also, I mentioned philanthropic capital is needed. Philanthropic capital is what sets this all in motion. This is the blended concept. So I'm not dissing philanthropic capital. It's needed, but it needs to be used strategically to leverage the markets. And I think that's what they see. So they will actually invest philanthropic capital. We even have, like the Bezos Earth Fund and Amazon are investing philanthropic capital to help set all this in motion. But then the corporates then can come in with the investing capital and use their balance sheets that is capital that's sitting on the sideline that provides them a financial return, as well as the ability to speak in their annual reports about how many people they're reaching with water through that mechanism.
I wonder if there's anyone on the panel that wants to speak more to that point. And what I mean is the role of philanthropy versus the role of capital, private capital, maybe even government development money. How do we blend these things in a way to make them more optimal?
Maybe
Vaishali,
I can give a couple of examples. In India, for example, the government funds, we have a CSR regulation, perhaps the only country in the world which has one, has been quite useful in mobilizing funds, perhaps for water, for women, for climate, etc. And of course, not everybody is responsible, but many corporates are responsible and deploy these funds in a responsible way to impact society. So that's one. One of the examples of the work we are doing, we're working with Microsoft Softs for some green credits. But we are doing a project for them, which is about 450 megawatts of size. But they entered into this agreement with us based on the social responsibility work we were doing in that area, and they have agreed to commit $1 million every year for 15 years, so $15 million towards an environmental justice fund, which will be used, and the funds from there will be used to deploy in the area which is in Maharashtra, in the state of Maharashtra, where we are doing the project, and we'll be working to kind of with the community to address needs of the community, like skilling and some of the sort of climate-related programs we do. So we have a bunch of strategic programs. So that is another way in which we are engaging. We have a foundation, which is Renew Foundation, and we have financial institutions like HSBC, etc., SIDBI, which is a local financial institution. They are, again, contributing to some of our projects because they do, like the Lighting Lives program, we get $1 million from HSBC every year as public information. And so various other organizations want to partner with us for impact on the ground, whether it's with respect to children, which is one of the programs we have for youth, for women, climate-related other programs which we have around entrepreneurship, engaging women in entrepreneurial activities, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who get most impacted by climate and and then they also know the solutions, but most often they're not engaged as much as they should be. So we are trying to get them, getting them a seat on the table in the rural area and various other programs. So these are some of the ways in which we are using different innovative models to kind of deploy capital in programs which have a social impact.
Excellent. Wes, you were going to weigh in?
Yeah,
Chairman.
yeah, thank you. And I think that's something that Chairman and Frederick and I are working on in the Amazon, but I'll give one quick example outside of the Amazon, which is the Eastern Tropical Pacific. So 4 years ago, we brought a coalition of funders, local NGOs, international NGOs, government, and local communities around what we call a one plan approach. So if you look at philanthropy historically, people are very divided. It's brands and egos. It's not mission first. We've really actually started revolutionizing conservation by bringing people together. So the Protecting Our Planet pledge, which is 11 of the biggest environmental organizations, including Rewild, actually came in, committed about $160 million over the by 2030 to get the 4 countries, Ecuador, Colombia, Panama, and Costa Rica, up to 30 by 30, so protecting 30% of their freshwater, marine, and terrestrial habitats. Now that actually catalyzed such an enormous amount of things because we were for the first time able to actually figure out who was working where the investments were needed, and then how could we actually scale up. So for the first time ever, if anyone's been to the Galapagos, we've restored islands in the Galapagos where no one lives. The inhabited islands are actually totally deconstructed, and the people there are impoverished because of that. So we started in Floriana, which only has about 150 people. That was a 10-year project to get everyone aligned on this restoration project. They were able then to get investments by the government. They had the first time ever they actually had a dock before you would just lash up to the rocks. And then this scaling happened not only in Ecuador, but also in Colombia, Panama, and Costa Rica, to the point where we now have private capital coming in. So the largest debt swap for nature was done in Ecuador, $1.6 billion, which is now bringing $400 million to protection of the Galapagos National Park, and being able to do that in other landscapes. So Chairman Frederick and Rewild and others have been working in the Amazon. So the Protecting Our Planet group came in very quickly after the assault on the administration, the new administration in 2023. In May of 2023, we launched a $150 million fund to, for the first time ever, help institute this one plan approach for the Amazon. The government pledged this zero deforestation approach, but without private philanthropy, they wouldn't have been able to do that as quickly as possible because multilaterals, bilaterals, and others take time to come in. Yeah. That's now catalyzed a huge amount. There's a lot of innovative financing coming into the bioeconomy, looking at debt and other issues as well.
So it's reducing risk, but also starting to prove out a model as well, early philanthropy?
Absolutely, and this all is based on people on the front line. So indigenous peoples in the Brazilian Amazon that are given title to their land, we see over and over again, they're the ones that are actually protecting the rainforest. So as most people in this room know, the biggest driver of deforestation, at least in the Brazilian Amazon, is cattle, both pasture and feed. So in the last 40 years, 95% of the deforestation has been driven by one industry. We haven't been unified around what we need to do to protect that, but we have seen that the people on the front line, given the resources, can actually protect that. And you can see indigenous territories in space that have protected their rainforest.
And it's good economically for those communities as well. Chairman, what would you add to that, both in terms of the role of philanthropy versus capital, and you were talking about the value chain, but maybe even expanding on what Wes was talking about in the Amazon and your work there.
How do I put this? First of all, we have to deal with human organization. So even for ourselves, we have business operating funds, we have impact funds, we have nonprofit funds. Each of them sitting in the position has a position, there's a performance, there's a valuation. So when you're deploying the funds, it's actually very difficult. So when we're developing a fund, like we do a collaboration, I have to see inside where I pulled. And then, of course, the person in charge has to agree, which is another thing you need to manage, practicality.
Yeah.
Now, since we're an innovation house, the most difficult impact investment is in social innovation. That brings into social development. Oh, that's a very word, social enterprise, but actually it's very difficult to create a business model. So we have, let's say, we have funds that we actually partner, let's say government nonprofit foundation that we want to do this. We have a partnership with venture capitalists on this fund and do it another approach. And then we have our own fund, which actually under my direct control to do it because it's so difficult. Now, let's say the latest project, just this morning I was talking to the minister, we're doing is addressing a Singapore challenge they call the bottom 5%. Now, Singapore is very wealthy. They're very ahead of education. But they found a bottom 5% into a systemic issue. Generation after generation, they cannot hold a job. They can't hold a marriage. They have addiction problem. There are crimes. And no matter how much resources they can't solve, they call the bottom 5%. And they do research on it. Now we're collaborating with a program that let business find a solution to solve. We will engage government policy. We will work with government. We will engage social sector. We'll engage other business to do in a 6-year test program. These are very different way of deploying a lot of funds from a lot of people. So I think to answer that, the most important thing is managing people and organization alignment.
Absolutely. So, you know, I was just sitting in the session before on collective impact. And for those of us in the social space for the last 20 years, we've been talking about collective impact. And a lot of the conversation was pretty conceptual. But there actually is a body of research and knowledge around how collective impact works, how you bring these institutions together. It's not it's not an end all, but you start with a common goal. You have to agree on the goal. And then a common set of strategies. And then what role are you going to play versus you going to play versus you going to play? And then common metrics that create a common language for everyone. And then a backbone organization, an infrastructure organization that makes sure the trains run on time. And because a collection of individuals go back and do their own thing after the meeting's over or whatever. And so it's human nature to do that. So it makes me wonder this. I got a couple of things, Gary. I'm going to come back to you on how you put a for-profit inside a nonprofit that I think folks might want to hear about. But what are the biggest challenges you think to create this new systemic way of working? What's the biggest challenge?
Suspension of disbelief. Everyone's programmed to believe that nonprofits, NGOs are not going to be good stewards of investment capital. And so it's really trying to build evidence bases to demonstrate. You know, you have to go out and build it before you can talk about it, because the preponderance is to disbelieve that an organization can do this from a social perspective and operate in a business climate. We're seen as the B team, frankly, you know, in this business. And so, I mean, look at the challenge. We had to go out and convince investors that you entrust your capital to us. We're going to go help millions of women making a few dollars a day get access to water and sanitation. We're going to see enough value in that to be able to then give you a financial return on your investment. It's like, No, it's like everybody knows. This is why we have more than 1,000 water NGOs out there, because we believe all poor people are equally poor. And we believe that all of them are too poor to be able to participate financially in their solutions. And so that's a huge suspension
Or
of
the generation
disbelief.
of ideas even.
So, yeah, exactly. And so the suspension of disbelief is like, trust us. We know this. We've been doing this for 30 years. We know how people in poverty get access to water. We've studied it, and we've built business models around it. And so we had to go out and raise that first fund with friends and family of $11 million to get the evidence base so that we could then move on and actually create an asset manager. So it is, crazy to think that what we see as one of the biggest social problems in the world can be solved through the capital markets, or at least a big part of it. I don't want to seem Pollyannish like it's just all about loans. There has to be government still stepping in for some of the poorest communities to bring in subsidies. But hundreds of millions, if not billions of people could thrive from their water and sanitation perspective by getting access to capital. And that's what we do to try to be able to bring that to the market in a way that competitive financial returns can flow to whether these corporations or a lot of high net worth individuals using their donor advised funds, using the corpus of their foundation while they're waiting to give the money away, they can invest it and build that through something like this. And so I think that's our challenge in this sector of social innovators and philanthropy and venture philanthropy, is to be able to build some evidence base, paint the picture, go out and prove it, so that disbelief can be suspended, and then, the capital markets will respond.
Right.
There's no doubt about that if you have a viable approach and you prove it and you demonstrate it year after year, fund after fund. And that's what I believe is the challenge for our social sector, to go out and use, the 3,000 members of Catalyst now, they're on the ground. They know how value is created with the communities that they're trying to work with, and then translating that value creation into opportunities for impact investing. Again, not everything is going to be solved through impact investing, but there's a whole lot of latent ability to tap into value creation to create funds that will help solve the problems.
Vaishali, what do you see as the same question, the kind of challenges of getting different sectors to work together, different interests to work together, and kind of building on Gary's point, how do business interests align with community interests, align with government interests, and how do you put those, how do you resolve when there are differences to put that together?
Sure. That's a great question. As I'd mentioned earlier, in India, we've seen there is a government interest to engage the private sector for social good, and that's happening. The private sector is committed by regulation, and in other cases, because of philanthropic interests. Like in India, we've seen post-independence, there was a huge wave of philanthropy, which was in, kind of nation building, etc. As we speak now, over the last 10 years, we've seen funds flowing into areas like climate, women-related areas, skilling, etc. So there is an alignment of what the private sector wants to do with what the government is offering, what the community needs on the ground. If we look at the level of education, whether it is just education or whether it is climate education, there's a huge gap. And then you have the private sector coming in to kind of get to work there. And then there is obviously this whole area of, blended finance. How can you bring that and put that to use? And I think that's an area which requires a lot more work. I think we're at very early stages. I think people need to understand, like when I was listening to you, Gary, I can get it because I worked in the financial sector. Yeah. But when you look at the massy sort of set of folks, the general perception is that, yes, I can do, and I am good at social work, social impact related, but as far as finance is concerned, we have CEOs of NGOs telling us, listen, just bring in a consultant or just take over that part, because that's a part we don't get it. We have the heart, but we don't have the number game, and we need help there. In fact, there is a lot of effort from organizations like us, where we work with some of these organizations to help them with the whole financial aspect of their portfolio, because there is a sense of underconfidence there. The other challenge we also face is just getting people who you want to work with to come out confidently and accept that. So, for example, women, if we go to certain states, are super confident, and if you kind of guide them, for example, in the state of Gujarat in India, they have that sense of business acumen, and anything we implement there is good to fly. But then there are a large part of the country, there is that lack of confidence and your inability to be able to put funds to use there. So, we have to work in capacity building and various other activities so that you can prepare the community to receive as well. Mm-hmm. And there, of course, then you partner with the various institutions. Some of them are skill building institutions like the government of India. You put funds into skilling NGOs who partner with us to achieve those sort of goals. But I think really how we can put blended financing to good use on the ground, how we can engage even international organizations to work in areas where, funds can be put to use for greater social impact. I think that's a huge gap. And I think to a certain extent, there's a lot of macro work going on. There's a lot of sort of high-level work. I think the connect between some of these organizations and how things can be done on the ground is missing. And I do feel that when we come in, and without wanting to kind of plug in any way, because that's not the intent, we work with folks on the ground. So the Microsoft example is a good one, that we understand the communities, we do have our own fund, we have our skin in the game, and so they feel also confident about working with us to scale that impact, which is super valuable.
If I could just build on that real quick, because the government of India is doing tremendous things in this regard, and they're one of our best partners because they have made a public commitment to reaching everyone with sanitation and with water, but also recognizing they don't have enough in the government coffers to do it all. And so we've worked across all the states, actually, to incorporate this model into the plans with them. And so now, I think in India alone, it's been something like $2 billion in microloans that have been generated to help people get access to water and sanitation, which reinforces the government's drive to get universal access. So I think it's always important to look at those public-private partnerships where everybody wins.
It strikes me as I listen to that part of the conversation that, at least in my experience, how you achieve impact is different than how you get a financial return. And so when we mash these things together over the last 20 years, too often, in my view, the social impact or the impact work gets subordinated to the financial frameworks versus saying, let's let them be who they are and bring what they bring to the party and do it well and learn how to leverage each other as species and nature do. And when we try to force these things together is when it feels like we create models that are misaligned.
I just wanted to come in with one very quick point. So one area where we see a lot of work where communities can also make returns is the area of the nature-based solutions area in India. So there is an opportunity to engage the communities just like you're doing, where people are looking at returns on engaging in areas like water. We've seen whether it's cook stoves, whether it's plantation, etc. The business model can be constructed in such a way that there is demand by investors, and you have to engage the local communities to find indigenous solutions on the ground, engage them in employment and so on and so forth. And it's a win-win for all the stakeholders involved.
Anything from Wes or Chairman Fred before we go to the audience? So we'll take 10 minutes of questions maybe. So does somebody have a microphone that can get that, because for folks online? And just let us know who you are, and if you could keep the question brief to a question.
Hi, I'm Shona from Cape Town. I'm Schwab Fellow, Social Entrepreneur and Innovator. I had a question for you, Gary. You talk about capital markets responding when it's obviously investable. But at what return, given that most, in our experience, and when we manufacture pediatric wheelchairs for rural areas and provide services around that in Africa, but the return that they demand on those loans are just not, we can't meet them, given the space we're working in.
It's a good question. So what's the return your investors are looking for?
So what I can talk about, because of the Security Exchange Commission regulations, and what I can talk about is, we provide what we believe are competitive financial returns in the market. And we can talk more one-on-one about what specific offerings there are, but I can't talk about that in a public setting because of regulations.
Very fair.
So there are what we believe are competitive returns, and they are returns that have allowed us to bring in partners like the Development Finance Corporation in the U.S., to bring in high net worth individuals. Certainly people see this as a blended return for them, that they can actually get a financial return that we believe is competitive, but also they get outsized social impact. And it is challenging. This is hard work to try to, these problems that we're trying to solve, there's a reason they haven't been solved before, because it is really hard. But I think, trying to unearth that value creation that happens for people that are even making a few dollars a day, that they're willing to then turn up and participate financially in their solutions, because it creates so much more value for them than what it is that they're taking out for a loan. I would say partner with the local financial institutions that are there to see if you can help them understand there is a market for wheelchairs, and that finance from them locally might help them to develop a new product line, because they're interested in that as well. But it is getting out and understanding that value creation, translating that into the capital providers to hopefully make it work.
Got it. Next question right here, yeah. And then we'll go, there was one here and then one back here.
Thank you. So I'm Jackie. I'm going to wear my hat of the head of a small organization from Lebanon, which is a small country. And I would like to ask all of you, when we hear that big organizations are struggling for funds, what do you think is the situation for us, the small organization? At the same time, in times of crisis, and this is my question particularly, in disasters and crisis, we see that we are the frontliners. We know our people. We speak their language. We know how to get them the aid they need. Whereas, with all due respect, and I've seen that happen in Lebanon after the Beirut port blast, during COVID, after in all types of crises.
Yeah.
So how do we make the funds and the money get to those frontliners, because the requirements sometimes are, sorry for the word, ridiculous.
So
they want a history.
So let's, who wants to respond to that? Because, go ahead, Wes.
Yeah, I think that's actually a key question in philanthropy, and one of the reasons we have our innovative model at Rewild, in that we have a core set of donors that funds all of the operations overhead costs for Rewild. And the reason that we have Rewild, obviously, as this global brand, is to represent our local partners that will never be able to invest to have a brand that people can recognize, marketing, communication. And for us, that allows us, when we're going out and bringing money into Haiti or into Malaysia, to get 100% of the funds to programmatic work in those areas. But we do that not as a funder, we do that as a partner. So we work shoulder to shoulder with our partners, because exactly what you said, the people on the front lines know what needs are, know what the solutions are, and also can be able to scale those up. And that's something that I think is critical for philanthropy. And we play that hybrid role between shoulder to shoulder with funders. So we've got foundations, individuals, corporations that are using the Rewild platform, and then shoulder to shoulder with our partners to distribute those resources. And it can be more than philanthropy. It can be communications. It can be a global platform. It can be science. It can be strategy. All those resources that we need to get to the front lines.
And you've got to be on the front line and local at some point. Right here, and then we'll come back here. Matt, right here. Yep.
Thanks a lot to the wonderful panel. I have a question. So I'm from the SDG Impact Finance Initiative. It's the public-private philanthropic partnerships blended finance platform that creates, I liked your expression, Gary, financial plumbing, let's say, to bring private financing into the emerging markets. But of course, and everything that was discussed really resonates with our mandate. We do use philanthropic and public capital catalytically, and it is indeed needed. But it's needed because of the misperception of risks in emerging markets, right? Exactly what Gary mentioned, that there is a market there. So how can we solve these barriers of misperception of risks? Beyond, of course, building evidence. And do you have any other ideas beyond blended finance? What can be used? Thank you.
Chairman, you want to take that? How do you consider risk when you look at these kind of projects?
Well, first of all, we scope where our boundaries are, that we can go there or can't go there, or area we don't know anything, because risk is totally related with your experience and knowledge of the topic or the area. So it's important to identify people in the area you work with, that people are comfortable with the risk. So if you today ask you, oh, would you like to move to Iran or somewhere with war, or you go to, of course not. But people that survive there knows how to survive there, and they know how to take the risk. So it's all about strategically scoping where you want to operate and work with people that are comfortable with the boundaries with those risks. And then just like blended finance, they're de-risking. If they're big players, they will de-risk other people that follows them. They become a ringleader, and other people say, okay, that guy locally has some reputation, and they take that risk. I will co-invest and follow them. There's a lot of investment. We have no idea, but we'll follow you because you have a track record.
You know, so both answers were go local, make sure you're on the front line. That's where trust is built. That's where knowledge is, and whether it's risk or anything. Yeah. Probably. Hey, Matt, what time do we have to cut off?
One more question.
One more question. I knew it. I knew it was about time.
Thank you. My name is Renat. My name is Renat. I'm also one of the Schwab Foundation fellows.
Excellent.
I'm chairman of a company called Empower, which is in the solar business in Africa. And my question is building up on what you just said, risk. In our experience, it's not about the returns. These projects are hugely profitable on paper. But what absolutely limits the growth is the risk, it's the default risk. You're selling, there's so much potential to sell more solar power plants, but the default risk is just too high. So in addition to the trust, which is of course important, does the panel have any views on what other instruments have worked in reality to de-risk the fact that you're selling your plants to middle to low income households?
So this is interesting because we started a new company just to address these issues of risk, because it's really difficult to get a $50 or $100 million water treatment plant built. We need more infrastructure that's climate resilient. We need more of that infrastructure that is going to serve low-income populations. But there is a dearth of what's considered bankable deals out there to get this done. And so why is it? It's because there's this kind of valley of death in the development phase of projects where it's too risky to be doing this in these markets, in these fragile or broken markets. And to develop a project, a $50 million water treatment plant might take $2 million of development cost to do the studies, to ensure that it's going to be resilient to climate change, to be sure that it's serving the social, economic levels that you want it to. Local developers have got a gap, and so what we've done is created Water Connect as a project development company. We can bring that level of capital in to work with, to your point, local people, local project developers, to then take the risk to the point where we can get to financial close. And the reason we can do that is because when we're developing that project, we know that if it meets the right criteria of water equity, our asset manager, that the investment will actually come. This is another reason why people don't develop projects, because they're doing it in a vacuum and they don't believe it's going to get to financial close. And so if we can bring the investor together with the project development, it starts to bring the de-risking level that's needed in this most critical area of developing projects to get to financial close so that the investments will come. And that, I think, think is something that will actually, when these things reach financial close, our project development company will actually get paid a fee to go with that. So we can create that as another sustainable business that's then owned by water.org.
Great, we're going to have to finish on that. Let me ask the panelists to close this out in a minute or less. Imagine that we're sitting in this exact same session, same title, 5 years from today. What is it that we're talking about then that we did not talk about today? Vaishali.
Perhaps the theme of the World Economic Forum, how we can use intelligent ways to be able to deploy more and engage the community more for their benefit and to have an impact on their lives. So I think intelligent solutions are going to also be very important in driving scalability, etc. Perhaps that's
excellent.
Thought.
Gary?
I guess hopefully the script is flipped, and that having so many good ideas that are searching for capital, there'll be more capital coming in.
There are abundance of capital.
Good ideas, and I think it is key. And I'd say for everybody here who is looking for that, ways to place those investments, those opportunities are out there. But also, I know there's probably audience members too who represent funding that's needed. So come to us if you have what you believe are entrepreneurial ideas, are water solutions. We have capital ready to deploy for good ideas to build this.
Now, that's something you don't hear in Davos very often, right there. So, Chairman, 5 years from today.
Well, we all know the system is not working. We're talking about all the things. The system doesn't work right now. And then there's a war, there's a revolution. There's everything to break down the system, to recreate. Money is an exchange, and money is change. We talk about this crypto craziness. We talk about capital markets, which definitely will be reformed over the 5 years because they no longer serve business that serve human. They all do misaligned. Money doesn't serve business. Business doesn't serve people. There's a major misaligning of the system that we need to do, and this is coming to a global revolution. People don't accept it. All the ugliness is all in the front with all this polarization. And I know that evolution is informed by the challenge in front of us, that when we will focus ourselves 5 years today, something better will be created.
Very nice. Wes?
Thank you, and thank you everyone for being here. I would just say that 5 years from now, having nature front and center, knowing that almost every economic system in the history of the planet is actually based on nature and the environment. We just don't incorporate that into the economic system. So there is no conflict between true economics and the environment. We should have a unified approach to that and move away from extraction and exploitation towards protection and restoration, realizing that we have one home and $1 is worth nothing on a dead planet.
And the last reminder I'd have for all of us is that, in 5 years, hopefully it's people and planet in the center of whatever model. If we need business models, we need catalytic funding, we need all those things, but we're a species living out of context. And we've got to put people and planet back in the center. Help me thank this incredible group of leaders.